Do you ever make a vow or promise to God or to yourself and then quietly walk away from it? Just remember that promises don't just embarrass us. They warp our whole spiritual economy when we don't act upon them. And in Leviticus 27, we're going to see how ancient Israel priced commitment, how it reveals God's sovereign ownership of life, people, and property. And I'm going to give you one action that you can make today. So today we'll see how we can move from casual vows to faithful living in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. And if today's episode resonated with you, feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now for some context on the chapter. Leviticus 27 actually closes the book of Leviticus after we saw laws about holiness, worship, the Sabbath, the Jubilees, and priestly life. Chapter 27 actually brings us to vows and consecration, how Israelites solemnly dedicate people, animals, houses, fields, or money to the Lord, and how those dedications are valued, redeemed, or irrevocably given, and how Jubilee and the social order shape what promises actually mean. If you're joining in the middle of our series, think of Leviticus 27 as the ledger of Israel's promise economy. It actually connects one's personal commitment to communal order and the year of release logic we saw in Leviticus 25. So you don't need to read the whole book to follow. This chapter is both intensely practical and intensely theological, as God owns what we vow. Now let's read the chapter in full and understand each verse in context. Verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when a person makes an explicit vow to the Lord concerning the equivalent for a human being, the equivalent for a male shall be from 20 to 60 years of age, the equivalent shall be 50 shekels of silver, by the sanctuary shekel. If the person is a female, the equivalent is 30 shekels. If the age is from 5 to 20 years of age, the equivalent is 20 shekels for a male and 10 shekels for a female. If the age is from 1 month to 5 years, the equivalent for a male is 5 shekels of silver, and for a female the equivalent is 3 shekels of silver. And if the person is 60 years old or over, then the equivalent for a male is 15 shekels, and for a female 10 shekels. If any cannot afford the equivalent, they shall be brought before the priest, and the priest shall assess them. The priest shall assess them according to what each one making a vow can afford." So the first biblical unlock that we can identify here is that God ultimately owns life. That is to say that this doesn't mean that people have different moral worths, like we saw in this particular chapter or this particular section, that a male needs to give 50 shekels, but then a female only needs to give 30 shekels. The different valuations here does not mean there are different moral worths, because there are different sums according to age and sex, and that's usually due to the considerations of economic productivity, what a person can do. We remember in Genesis chapter 1 verses 26 to 27 that all are created in the image of God and that all have the equal moral worth. Why do we even make vows at all though? We can see it here. When a person makes an explicit vow to the Lord concerning the equivalent for a human being, then they have to give a certain amount of money. The reason why we make vows is actually to express gratitude to God, and it shapes the giver. It allows the person to show devotion back to God. It disciplines your heart, and it prevents harm. The radical point here is that God controls and owns life. This doesn't mean that you don't own yourself. What it means is that your life belongs to God first, and that you can't give yourself literally because God already claims you. So the vow is like trying to honor the landlord, and the God is just saying, look, just pay the symbolic rent, and don't let your zeal for me run rampant. Okay, now we're going to read verses 9 to 13, and we're going to identify another biblical unlock as well. If the vow concerns an animal that may be brought as an offering to the Lord, any such animal that may be given to the Lord shall be holy. Another shall not be exchanged or substituted for it, either good for bad or bad for good. And if one animal is substituted for another, both that one and its substitute shall be holy. If the vow concerns any unclean animal that may not be brought as an offering to the Lord, the animal shall be presented before the priest. The priest shall assess it, whether good or bad, according to the assessment of the priest, so it shall be. But if it is to be redeemed, 1/5 must be added to the assessment. Biblical unlock number 2 here. True devotion requires sacrifice, and redemption is costly. You'll notice that an animal can be brought for a vow, right? To honor to God what belongs to him already. But he says true devotion requires sacrifice, and redemption is costly. So God can't be manipulated. That is to say, animals which are clean and could already serve God can be vowed to God, but unclean animals that we saw here in verse 12, unclean animals are unsuitable for worship and must be appropriate to God's holiness. You cannot offer something unclean and expect God to accept it, which is why, as we see in verse 13, we see, but if it is to be redeemed, 1/5 must be added to the assessment. So if you offer an unclean animal to God, 1/5 must be added, or a surcharge on top of the price. And it's actually quite theological here, because if you're sinful and you pretend you're good, you'll end up in hell, because this is the good person fallacy. If you believe that what you're offering is good to the Lord, and when you offer it to the Lord and you ultimately realize that this is nothing, you will ultimately end up in a place which is where Jesus Christ says there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. In fact, the only way that we can truly understand where we will end up is by realizing that we are sinful, we've inherited original sin, and that we must be redeemed by the saving work of Jesus Christ, and we live that out through our lives. So remember, whatever you offer must be perfect to God, and the only perfect thing that we can offer to God is the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now we're going to go through the third section of the chapter, which is verses 14 to 25. We're going to understand animals, houses, fields, and the Jubilee horizon. So, verses 14 to 25. And when a man dedicates his house to be holy to the Lord, then the priest shall set a value for it, whether it is good or bad, as the priest values it, so it shall stand. If he who dedicated it wants to redeem his house, then he must add 1/5 of the money of your valuation to it, and it shall be his. If a man dedicates to the Lord part of a field of his possession, then your valuation shall be according to the seed for it. A homer of barley seed shall be valued at 50 shekels of silver. If he dedicates his field from the year of Jubilee according to your valuation, it shall stand. But if he dedicates his field after the Jubilee, then the priest shall reckon to him the money due according to the years that remain till the year of Jubilee, and it shall be deducted from your valuation. And if he who dedicates the field ever wishes to redeem it, then he must add 1/5 of the money of your valuation to it, and it shall belong to him. But if he does not want to redeem the field, or if he has sold the field to another man, it shall not be redeemed any more. But the field, when it is released in the Jubilee, shall be holy to the Lord. As a devoted field, it shall be the possession of the priest. And if a man dedicates to the Lord a field which he has bought, which is not the field of his possession, then the priest shall reckon to him the worth of your valuation up to the year of the Jubilee, and he shall give your valuation on that day as a holy offering to the Lord. In the year of Jubilee the field shall return to him from whom it was bought, to the one who owned the land as a possession, and all your valuation shall be according to the shekel of the sanctuary, 20 gerahs to the shekel. Biblical unlock number 3 here. Where does your security come from? You can vow your property to God, and it says in the chapter, or this particular passage, that redemption is actually going to cost extra. And you may be wondering, like, why on earth would anyone want to dedicate their house to God? What's the purpose of it? Why am I even doing this? What was the necessity for this action in ancient Israel? The reason why a person would dedicate their house to God is to show and recognize where their ultimate sense of security comes from. It's not about giving or dedicating your house to God, and we're going to see this later on in the chapter. It's about recognizing that your security does not come ultimately from wealth. It does not come from the fact that you have a house. It comes from God. And the reason why you have to be particular, and there are rules that regulate how you should give the house, the valuation of the house, the fact that priests mediate over the valuation of the houses, because this sort of valuation can be abused. And the fact that leading up to the year of the Jubilee, and remember the Jubilee, the field shall return to him, from him it was brought, and the one who owned the land as a possession, everything was returned, all of this sort of stuff, right? We need to have fairness and justice when we're doing these sorts of things. Otherwise, it can be easily abused. And in fact, we're going to see how this valuation is going to be abused later on in the Bible. Okay, fourth and final section, verses 26 to 34. But the firstborn of the animals, which should be the Lord's firstborn, no man shall dedicate, whether it is an ox or sheep, it is the Lord's. And if it is an unclean animal, then he shall redeem it according to your valuation, and shall add 1/5 to it. Or if it is not redeemed, then it shall be sold according to your valuation. Nevertheless, no devoted offering that a man may devote to the Lord of all that he has, both man and beast, or field, or the field of his possession, shall be sold or redeemed. Every devoted offspring is most holy to the Lord. No person under the ban who may become doomed to destruction among men shall be redeemed, but shall surely be put to death. And all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. If a man wants at all to redeem any of his tithes, he shall add 1/5 to it. And concerning the tithe of the herd or the flock, of whatever passes under the rod, the 10th one shall be holy to the Lord. He shall not inquire whether it is good or bad, nor shall he exchange it. If he exchanges it at all, then both it and the one exchanged for it shall be holy. It shall not be redeemed. These are the commandments which the Lord commanded Moses for the children of Israel on Mount Sinai. So, biblical unlock number 4. Why does 1/10 belong to the Lord? I don't know if you caught that, but it says that all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, it is the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. So why does God want 1/10 of your money, 1/10 of your produce, 1/10 of your land? I think it's important to reiterate that God does not want your money. God does not need anything. We read in Psalm chapter 50 verse 12 that if I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and all that is in it is mine. If God wants money, if God wants anything, he could just create it. But he doesn't want your money, okay? The answer actually lies with us, not with God. The reason why we would tithe to God, tithe to religious institutions, tithe to our church, to our community, is more to do with, do you trust God with your security? As Jesus tells us that you cannot serve both God and wealth. God doesn't want 1/10 of your money. He wants your trust, allegiance, and your freedom from the slavery of seeking your ultimate stability from wealth. And if you're unwilling to give 1/10, that possibly suggests that that is where your true devotion and allegiance lies. Okay, and now we're going to see how this chapter actually foreshadows Jesus Christ. The vow economies of Leviticus, the fact that we consecrate, redeem, and give an irrevocable devotion, all point forward to Christ's one-for-all dedication. Jesus Christ is both the perfect offering and the perfect redeemer. Where Israel needed mechanisms to dedicate and redeem, Christ fulfills and replaces them by his single self-sacrifice that both consecrates, which makes holy, and redeems, pays the price. He shows that humanity is finally owned and restored by divine love, not by imperfect pledges. And as we read in the New Testament, in Romans chapter 12 verse 1, I appeal to you therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Remember that the ultimate sacrifice is Jesus Christ, who came down, bore our sin, and took them up to God. I promise to give you 1 or 2 crisp actions that you can apply in your everyday life. So the first thing I want you to do is examine your promises. You have to ask, what promises have I made to God or others that I've let lapse? And if you write up one vow, make sure you can restore it, and if it's practical, make sure there's a time, money, and service so that you can actually schedule the first step and tell one trusted friend the plan. And the second thing I want you to do is, if you feel a vow has become cheap, it's important to make a visible act of restoration. Add a small fifth, give an extra 20% of your time or money toward the person or mission that you vowed to support, and announce it to an accountability partner. This actually mirrors the Levitical surcharge that we see here as a modern form of discipline in seriousness. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. Next time we're going to move from the promise to the pilgrimage, and I'll actually unpack Numbers 1, where Israel is going to be counted and consecrated to move out, and we're going to notice how valuation actually turns into mobilization, and how promises actually create marching orders, actual practical steps in our lives. So you don't want to miss it. We'll use this as a way of building a practical plan for commitment that actually moves you forward. So thanks for listening. If Leviticus 27 reminded you that promises matter, don't let it become another thing you file away. Make one move this week, restore a vow, add a little surcharge of honest sacrifice, tell a friend, and if you found this helpful, smile. You've just taken a massive step towards living a promise-keeping life. I'd love to hear how the 5-minute vow audit goes. Send me a short note or tell your accountability partner. Don't forget to rate the show and follow. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.